You just brought home that brand new guitar, but it doesn't feel quite right. Here are 5 adjustments you can make to make sure that that 6-string plays the best that it can. I just picked this up. It's a 2019 Gibson SG Standard, and it plays great, but there's a couple things I'd like to tweak. So let's go through the 5 basic adjustments to get this to how I like it best. The 5 things I like to do when I first bring a new guitar home is look at the truss rod, look at the bridge height, the nut. I'll intonate each string, and then I might adjust the pickup height if they're all out of whack. The first thing I like to look at would be the truss rod, and if you don't know, the truss rod runs through the neck of the guitar and typically can be tightened underneath the truss rod cover found on the headstock. What that does is counteracts the tension from the strings. So a loose truss rod is going to pull with the strings as you tune it. A truss rod that is too tight is going to pull back against the strings and could actually create a bow. So if you're getting a lot of fret buzz, it could be because your truss rod is too tight. Let's move over to the bench and I'll show you how you can check to see if your truss rod needs an adjustment. I've got the guitar laying flat just for demonstration purposes. If you're doing this yourself, you will want to check this with the guitar in playing position, just because the weight of the guitar, the weight of the neck, when you're making an adjustment this way, might actually give you a false reading. For video purposes, I'm going to show you how to do it with the guitar laying flat. So what we were going to do is start by just placing a capo on the first fret, and then you can either place a second capo or use your finger down by where the neck meets the body of the guitar. So I'm just going to use my finger, and it looks like I'm on the 17th fret. And then what we're going to do is just tap. And we're going to tap the midpoint of the string to give us the relief or the curve of the neck. We're going to see where this SG is at. Now, just by sight and feel, I see that my straight string has a little bit of movement, which tells me that the neck has a slight curve underneath it. If you don't have one of these string action rulers, multi-measuring kind of device, a business card or a credit card, if you can fret down here on the approximately 17th fret and slide a business card in between the string and the frets, that's about perfect. For most guitars, the truss rod adjustment is going to be made here under some sort of truss rod cover. There's not always a cover. Fenders don't always have a cover. Fenders are kind of the exception to the rule. Most other guitars are going to have some sort of cover, and it's either going to have 2 or 3 screws that hold that cover on. Simply enough, remove the screws. Gibsons almost always have just 2, one on the top and bottom. Most other guitars will have 3. And just like that, it looks like it already wants to come off. And you can see the truss rod underneath the cover there. Now, when I checked this to see if I needed to make a truss rod adjustment, I didn't see that it was so out of spec that I want to make an adjustment, but I will show you if I did need to make one, how I would do that. For this example, Gibson actually includes a wrench that fits on that truss rod. I believe it's a 5/16 wrench. It's not always going to be a wrench. I believe Fenders use an Allen key. I think it's an 1/8" Allen key, and every brand might have. I don't think I can name every single wrench that every brand is going to use, but the process is going to be the same. Put your wrench or Allen key over the truss rod nut that's at the end, and then you're either going to tighten by pulling it this way or loosen by pushing it that way. Tightening the truss rod, which is just like tightening any other nut, righty tighty, lefty loosey. Tightening the nut is going to pull the headstock back away from the strings. Loosening it, pushing the wrench that way, is going to loosen the truss rod, and it's going to allow the strings to pull the neck towards the body of the guitar. So depending on which way you need to go, those are really the only 2 adjustments that can be made at the truss rod end. Some guitars have a double-ended truss rod. I'm not going to get into that. This is just kind of a basic quick setup for most guitars that are out there. Again, this guitar felt pretty good, so I'm not going to make an adjustment, and I'm just going to go ahead and replace the truss rod cover. One thing that I should mention is when you're making these adjustments, you're going to want to make sure that your guitar is in tune and in the key or tuned to the key that you're going to be playing in. If I have this in E standard and I make adjustments and it's not quite in tune, any truss rod adjustment or adjustment I make after is going to be all for naught. The string tension of the strings when they're tuned to, say, E standard is going to be different than if you even just drop D or any alternate tunings. So make sure that your guitar is in tune while you're making these adjustments. The next thing we're going to check would be the action or the height of our strings, and we do that by adjusting the bridge. There's multiple different bridges out there, but the two most common you're going to see are probably going to be the tune-o-matic style Gibson Epiphones or the Fender style, where each string has its own saddle with its own height adjustment. With the tune-o-matic, you really only have two options. You can raise or lower the high E side, and then you can raise or lower the low E side. And we check the action by doing two things. I like to fret the first fret, and then at the 12th, we take our string height ruler and we measure. The low E side can be anywhere from 1.5 millimeters to 2 millimeters. So again, fret the first and read at the 12th. Now mine's at about 1 millimeter, which is slightly lower than recommended. So I might end up bringing that string up just 0.5 millimeter. And what that will do is eliminate any fret buzz that might occur along the fretboard. Let's check the high E side. The high E side is coming in at also 1 millimeter, and the in-spec measurement for the high E can be anywhere from 1 millimeter to 1.5 millimeters. As you play more and more, you will probably develop your own personal preference to where you like that set. For now, we're just going to go with the book and do 1.5. That means we have to raise the high E side just a hair. To make that adjustment, typically with Gibsons, all you would have is the thumb wheels on either side. My 2019 actually came with an Allen key that fits right in the top. And to raise the string height, we're actually going to loosen or go in the direction that a person would typically loosen a nut. And what that does is it pushes the bridge up. So we're going to insert that and just loosen it ever so slightly. And then we'll go back and measure. Fender style saddles, each string has its own height adjustment. So if you need to raise the low E, you would insert an Allen key wrench into these two posts and rotate the key clockwise. That will bring the saddle up and raise the string height. One thing to keep in mind when doing an adjustment here is you're going to want to try to maintain the radius of the fretboard. So I don't know if you can see here, but the middle strings are slightly higher than the two E strings. And again, that's to match the radius of the fretboard. The fretboard isn't flat, so the strings aren't flat. The last thing I would check before we get to doing the intonation would be the nut depth of each string in its slot at the nut. I found that this typically doesn't need much adjustment, if any, but the way you would check is to fret at the third and then just tap and see what kind of travel you have at each string. If you have a lot of travel, you might need to file down the nut slot. I don't recommend doing this if you're new or if you're not sure that that's the adjustment that you need, because once
you file down the slot, you can't add it back in. I'm mentioning it because it is a normal part of setting up a guitar, and it's not uncommon that you might need to make an adjustment, but this would be a last resort because, like I said, once you file it down, you can't add it back in. If you do feel that you need to file down the slots, I would recommend getting a proper nut slot file set to do it the right way. I don't know that I would go off a measurement. I would maybe go off a feel on this. Just a little bit of movement on each string should be sufficient. If you have a lot of movement, yeah, you might need to file down your nut. The last adjustment we're going to check for is the intonation. Intonation is basically the tuning of the string at its octave. So the 12th fret should be an E, the same as the open string if we're talking about the low E here. To check, all you do is get out your tuner. I've got mine on the floor. Pluck your open string. And again, this probably should be done with the guitar in playing position just to take any undue stress off the neck. But for purposes of the video, I'm going to leave it in this horizontal position. We're going to start by plucking the open E and then fretting at the 12th and plucking it again. That one's coming up good. I'm going to move on to the next to see if I can find one that needs an adjustment. Let's take a look at the A. Open. Open, we're in tune. And at the 12th, we're still in tune. That one's all right. D. In tune. Open. At the 12th. Oop, that one looks like it might be a little sharp. Check again. Yep, that one's sharp. All right, we're going to do the D. The D is sharp at the 12th fret. Let's check it one more time. Yep. So what we need to do is make that string essentially longer to lower the pitch from the 12th fret to the saddle. And on a tune-o-matic, there is a flathead behind and slightly under each saddle.
Not 100% sure what happened here, but the shot of me actually making the adjustment was corrupted almost. But in essence, that screw or that bolt underneath the saddle, to draw the saddle back towards the back of the guitar, you want to rotate it clockwise. And if you're flat at the 12th fret, you need to push the saddle forward, and to do that, you would rotate counterclockwise. All right, back to the video. Quarter turn was all that it took. Repeat that process for all 6, either just by checking or actually adjusting them if they need. But that's all it really is. Essentially, if it's sharp, you want to pull the saddle back. If it's flat at the 12th, you want to push the saddle up. Now, at this point, the guitar should play pretty well. The last thing that we're going to check and possibly make an adjustment for is pickup height, and that's purely for tonal reasons. If you look here, there's a screw right here. There's one on this side as well. That's how we're going to adjust the height of the pickup. Now let's take a look at this SG. For where I like it, I probably will play this neck pickup, but I can already tell you that I'm going to want to lower this bridge pickup. So let's go ahead and do that. I've got a number 1 Phillips, and to lower the pickup, we're going to rotate counterclockwise on that screw. Same on the other side. And then I'll check to make sure that's even with my string height card.
I'm going to go down a little bit more on the low E side.
That's about perfect. Now this adjustment is purely player preference. Too high of a pickup will increase the high end but it could result in a shrill, feedbacky type, unpleasant tone. If you go too low with your pickup, you could actually bring the magnetic field of the pickup out of the string, resulting in a thin, weak sound. What I like to do is start with it low and then just slightly bring it up until it sounds good. And if it sounds good, it is good. And there it is. My 5 quick tips for getting a guitar set up and ready to play. I should note, I'm not a professional luthier. I'm not a professional guitar tech. I'm not here to say that's the only way to do it. This is the right way to do it. This is just a little insight from me. If something helped you, great. If you do it a different way, that's fine too. But I just thought if it helps one person, then the video was worth my time. As always, my name is Sam Isfeld, and we'll try to catch you on the next one. Thanks.